And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore. We never sit out. We are your hosts, MD and CD. Today we are talking college football playoffs. Okay, round two. Neutral site games, Fiesta Bowl, Peach Bowl, Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl. You know them. You love them. You've got some good matchups today. All right. You do have, though, two games that have a double-digit spread in them at this point in the playoffs, which, of course, is a lot of criticism, receives a lot of criticism from people. However, uh, I, Boise State, that's a team that's given some top teams in the country a scare and have handled business. And they also have probably the best player remaining in the entire playoffs. Arizona State, on the other hand, has been playing some of the best football of anyone in the last month. And Brian Ward, their defensive coordinator, is going to be dialed in. Texas's offense, have we been super impressed with them the last couple weeks? Because, quite frankly, I mean, I would say I was pretty impressed with their offense against Clemson, but also Clemson's defense has struggled, this season at times. So I'm just saying they're double-digit spreads, but stuff can happen, right? Stuff can happen. However, so far through the bowl games and the playoffs, a lot of these double-digit spreads, the favorites have covered those. Law of averages here? I don't know. Just saying. CD, we got 4 games we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about our best bets as well for the limited number of college football playoff games that we have. We just finished talking bowl games. Here we are talking college football playoffs. Season's kind of winding down here. It's a little bit upsetting that we're running out of football here in 2024. So we got to go to 2025, I guess.
Fine. Twist my arm. No, you're right. It's been an awesome season. This will be a very interesting second round, right? The first round you did mention you saw some blowouts. You saw all games decided by 10 plus points, other than the Indiana game, which came back close, whatever. I get that. But then you got these neutral site games now. You're going to be in Glendale, Arizona for the Fiesta Bowl. You got Atlanta, Georgia for the Peach Bowl. You got the granddaddy of them all, Pasadena, California for the Rose Bowl, and then the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, or like it always is. So it's going to be fantastic. You mentioned the double-digit spreads. We'll see how that happens. I have my preconceived conceptions. I think I'm feeling how I know how it's going to play out, but I also think like the bye week, I think matters, right? You've got teams that are super fresh. Look at Texas, who had two key offensive linemen go down. Your running back get banged up in that game against Clemson. So yes, it wasn't a sweat that you were going to lose that game right late in the fourth quarter. Obviously, Clemson did some things to make you, maybe cut it to a closer game. But that's the thing. It's like these games, it'll be interesting to see how much that bye week affects, those teams with the top 4 seeds, even if they are underdogs in these games. Like, I believe 2 of them are, and then one of them opened, right? So Georgia or in Notre Dame. Oh wait, yeah, Georgia opened as an underdog. So, and I guess Ohio State's favored now too. So that's wild. That's very, very wild. And the seeding obviously gets a lot of criticism for the college football playoff and the committee and everything else there. It is what it is. But at this point, all we can do is really just react and try to break down what's going to happen in these football games.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited. Some of these matchups, I think, like I've been waiting for Notre Dame to have a matchup like this. I thought that they were going to get it with Texas A&M, in terms of like physicality in the trenches. I don't know. Ohio State and Oregon, obviously anticipated rematch. I don't normally like rematches, right, in college football, but I think this is one that I can safely assume that I can safely say I'm very intrigued because it was in Eugene, right? You had Will Howard go down, that whole clock thing. I don't know. And then Big 12 SEC, Boise State getting a shot here against a team that, quite frankly, I haven't been super impressed with. And even against SMU, I was impressed with their offense, but not necessarily their defense at times, except for the timely stops that they got. So let's just get into them then. Let's talk about the Fiesta Bowl first. 11.5 point spread. Boise State is favored in this football game. Penn State, is favored in this football game. Boise State has the best player, I think, on the field. And the second best player on the field for either of these teams is ironically on the defensive side of the ball for Penn State, I think, in Abdul Carter. However, his impact in the run game, it's not limited by any stretch of the imagination, but there's only so much you can do, right? When Ashton Genty gets to the second level, what is Abdul Carter going to have? What is his impact going to be when Ashton Genty, they run the ball the other way, where he gets to the second level, which he so often does. Also, too, Boise State's offensive line is healthy. Okay. That was something that I missed when talking about the Mountain West Conference Championship game. They got some guys back on the offensive line that they hadn't had all season. And Genty has had what, almost a month to rest? That is nuts. Okay. For a guy that's had as much workload as he has had this season to get several weeks off and also be pissed off about the Heisman Trophy not being his, I think that this Boise State offense could absolutely be ready to go. The question is that Boise State defense, is Spencer Danielson going to have those guys on defense ready, right, to stop the run? Okay. Because SMU, uh, I guess, did okay at times, right? But the real thing is here, I think that Boise State is going to have to stop Drew Aller in the pass game. Drew Aller takes care of the football. I think he's actually been quite good at times. He's not going to take over a game for you. But against a secondary like Boise State's, which happens to be the weakest, I think, of the remaining college football playoff teams, I think Drew Aller could definitely take advantage of that. So can Tyler Warren. So can Trey Wallace, right? There are guys on that Penn State roster that I think can take advantage of Boise State on the defensive side of the football. So how are you feeling about this game? And should this game be an 11.5-point spread?
I think that sounds about right. I think it makes sense here. I do think it does matter. I'm going to go back to this bye here. So Penn State they had to play 130 snaps around there against SMU, like 10 days ago, 9 days ago, I guess 10 days ago from when the game's going to start. And then, Boise State's fresh. You mentioned Genty. They ran him a lot all season, and he got banged up in the midway through against UNLV. He came back, was pretty good, pretty healthy after that. He had 31 carries, right, in that Mountain West Championship, 32 carries, I'm sorry, of the 37, 35 rushing attempts that Boise State had. He was on the field for 61 of 65 offensive snaps. So they need him. They go to him. They do not going to hold back. And I have a feeling it's going to be a similar thing here. It's going to be a lot of Genty. And what I'm interested here is everyone knows that, right? And it's going to be all week long. It's going to be part of the game plan. How can we stop Genty? How are you going to? Can you do it with a regular box with 7 guys in there? Or do you have to add an 8th? And are you putting your corners and secondary in liable spots? And does Maddox Madsen have the ability to take advantage of that if that does become the case, right? Matt Lauder, you got Cam Camper. Capples had a nice game in the Mountain West Championship for Boise State. So to me, that's what I'm kind of looking for is like, yes, your fastball is the best fastball in all of baseball, right? But do you have that second pitch you can go to if they're sitting on it, right? Can you get them with the breaking ball? And that's going to be what's going to decide this game. I really wanted to go Penn State under, Boise State team total under in this game. Because I'm like, if Penn State's going to absolutely stop the run, which they have been good at times this year doing that, right? And they have the athletes, I think, to do it. Is Boise State going to be able to kind of adjust and pivot? And I think no. I lean no, because I think Penn State's got some guys in the secondary. But I also know that Maddox Madsen is a gamer, right? He's an absolute gamer. When they need him all year, he has stepped up and played big-time throws, big-time plays here. It's going to be really interesting. That to me is going to be what's going to be so fascinating is when Boise State has the ball and just seeing a sea of blue going towards Ashton Genty. I guess it might be a sea of white because they're technically the road teams. So we'll see what happens there. But it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and I think people will look at like Boise State and be like, dude, look what they were able to do against Oregon. They were able to run the ball against Oregon. I think there have been a lot of teams that have kind of been able to run the ball in Oregon. I
except
think
Ohio State, honestly, except Ohio State.
Except Ohio State, which is crazy. But I think that their front seven, Oregon's front seven, it's not like best team in the country front seven, if you know what I mean. I think Penn State's front seven is much more exceptional than perhaps Boise State. Than Penn State's front seven is perhaps much more exceptional than Oregon's front seven. It's been a long time since that week 2. I think quite frankly, Boise State's gotten better since then. Maybe the margin of scoring, hasn't necessarily kept up with some of those teams that they had early in the season. But I also think that teams have specifically had to change the game plan for Genti, and they still have not been able to stop him, right? I mean, UNLV had the most success against him, right, and held him to 136 yards. And I think Ashton Genti's prop bet right now for Penn State is 135 and a half, right? So they're predicting that Penn State is going to give Ashton Genti his worst game,
which is
right?
still a great
That,
game, by the way. You go in 130 in a playoff game
yeah,
against the top 10 rushing defense in the country is super, super impressive. I want to ask you this: like, how many yards does Genti need to have? Or I'll change this. If I tell you right now that Genti has 175 yards, does that make you feel, whoa? Does that make you
yeah,
change
that makes me
your
feel
pick?
that
Right?
makes me feel great. I mean, I'll have Penn State win. Okay, I haven't given out my pick yet. I'll have Penn State win. I'll have Boise State to cover though. The 11 and a half. I think that's a lot of points. I do think that Penn State, if Boise State, right, turns the ball over like SMU did, right, which is wild because I mean, we went in that game talking about SMU, and it's like they did actually have quite a bit of turnovers on the offense side of the football in the season, and maybe that was something that we kind of
Overlooked.
ignored. But Boise State, they've thrown 4 interceptions. That is the lowest number in the entire country. They've only lost 4 fumbles. Ashton Genty doesn't fumble a lot. I think he's fumbled like 1 time all year. They're top 15. Well, yeah, they're top 15 team in that regard as well. Like the turnover margin for them is pretty nuts. I mean, they've only turned the ball over 8 times all season, which I believe is the lowest in the country, if I'm doing that math right. So if Boise State is able to move the football, kind of like SMU was able to early in that game. And by the way, I think Boise State's offensive line is pretty comparable to SMU's, and I don't think that that's crazy to say. Okay, and I think people are just going to look at this game and be like, "Oh my gosh, Penn State killed SMU." You know, the box score snipers. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think Penn State just capitalized on SMU's mistakes, and the SMU's mistakes were just catastrophic. Right, they were inside the 10-yard line 3 times, right, and then I just think I think SMU could have made that game a lot closer, and I think Boise State is going to do what SMU did not do and maybe make this a closer game. And I do think Mad Max is a good quarterback. So I don't think he's going to play necessarily bad. I do think if he's the pressure that he's going to receive from this front seven is greater than anything that he's seen all season. But let's give Boise State's offensive line a little bit more credit than I think they've gotten all season, because we're talking about Ashton Genty, we're talking about Ashton Genty, Mad Max, Ashton Genty, Mad Max. This offensive line's been fantastic. Now, a lot of this was against Mountain West front sevens, and like I said, I told you before, I don't know that Oregon's front seven is best team in the country front seven, right? But holy cow, that offensive line has played really well.
Yeah, I would want to kind of piggyback off your turnover, part. Like, obviously, Boise State is 11-point dogs. So, like, the sharpest odds makers after 13, 14 games to watch these teams made a decision, and obviously it shows that there's an 11-point gap around 11-point gap between Penn State and Boise State. So Boise State has to make up that kind of margin somehow. I think obviously Genty, the great equalizer, right? He can be a guy that can do that for you. But turnovers is just such an easy way to do that, and like not losing the turnover battle, converting on red zones, right? Penn State's pretty good in the red zone. And red zone defensively too. They're really good in not allowing touchdowns when people get there. So those are those small margins that you saw SMU, and I know the score didn't show it, but they had chances in that game early to be in that football game in the second half, right? Indiana, early in that game, had opportunities, and they had big, massive point swings that changed the momentum of the game, right? Clemson had opportunities as well. So it's something that you got to keep an eye on. For Penn State, I look at Drew Alar, and if you look at it, he's done a good job of taking care of the football, right? 7 interceptions, 21 touchdowns thrown. That's pretty solid, but you kind of got to go deeper in that, because Penn State's a team where they're just going to outclass a lot of the guys on their schedule. And you look at the games where Drew Alar had to throw the football, right? When they are trailing or needing a big play, whatever it may be, you look at Oregon, right? In the college ball, in the Big Ten championship, he had 2 interceptions. You look at against Ohio State, he had an interception. You look at USC, he had 3 interceptions. Yeah, that's tough. And even Bowling Green, right? Early in the season when Alar had to, they had to kind of come from behind that game. He had an interception, that one as well. So that could be a spot here. I know Boise State's secondary is not elite, but they got good pass rushers. They do. And I think you can get to Alar and affect him. You pressure him like every single college football quarterback, he's going to make mistakes. Bad things are going to happen, right? And when you do pressure him, you have to get to him. You cannot let him scramble. He does a good job at times of picking up first downs or even extending plays and seeing what can happen there.
Yeah, his pocket awareness is pretty solid.
Yeah, well, yes, but my point is like you let him sit back there all day, like bad things are going to happen for your secondary, right?
Right.
I'm not saying you have to blitz, but I'm just saying you have to get some kind of pressure for him because your cornerback and your secondary is probably not good enough to just guard Tyler Warren one-on-one or to get schemed up all their guys open for you.
Yeah, I do think.
Can I
Well,
ask?
well, let me ask you this: like those games you talked about where they go down early, right? The USC game, they won that game, right? Bowling Green, they ended up coming back and winning that game. The year before, remember Indiana was up in that game, and then Drew Aller came back and won that game. Now here's the difference, okay? Those three teams can't run the ball like Boise State can. Like Boise State is a team that will suffocate you if they get a lead.
Look what they
Okay.
did to UNLV in that Mountain West championship
Oh
game
my
in that
gosh.
second half.
Yeah. Suffocating, right? Forcing Hodge Malik Williams to make plays through the air. And unfortunately, he was not able to do that, right? Plus, also, they did a good job boxing up Ricky White in that game for the most part, you know? So I think Boise State has seen elite talent, at the receiver spot, not necessarily at the tight end spot. That Tyler, but they've gone against really good players, particularly receivers. Now, I guess Jalen Royal in that Utah State game, he absolutely shredded Boise State's secondary. So there is spots for that to happen, right? But
I'll say Jalen Royal is probably a better football player than Trey Wallace is, right?
yes, but Tyler Warren is better than anything that they've played against this year.
Well,
So
yeah, because even the
Tez
Oregon guys,
Johnson,
the
Tez
Oregon guys,
Johnson's good.
well, yeah, but they just, yeah, Warren, you could be in the right spot for him, and it doesn't matter, right? It just
Yeah,
literally doesn't matter, or he can break 3 tackles and just keep going. I want to ask you this here: Genty versus the two running backs, K. Allen and Nick Singleton, right? Obviously, like the edge goes to Genty because only one person can carry the rock at one time, right? But it's gonna be nice for Penn State to, even though they have recently played, they played in the Big Ten championship game, they can be a little bit fresh because they are rotating backs. If I gave you a line and said, it's Nick Singleton plus K. Allen rushing yards 135 and Genty 135 rushing yards, like who's gonna have more? You think?
I think the combination of Nick Singleton and Kay Allen will have more rushing yards than Ashton Genty. And I think that might have to do more with a game script thing necessarily than me thinking that's a better running back room than just having Ashton Genty. Like I would rather have Ashton Genty just in my running back room, I think,
And two
than
pretty good ones.
than Nick Singleton and Kay Allen. That might sound stupid, and I think coaches would probably disagree with
Well,
that
for one
sentiment.
game sample, for a one game
Yeah, for
sample,
one game, for
without a
season long,
doubt.
yeah, for season long, I think teams appreciate the depth in the backfield and having that. But I think you're right for a playoff game. If every time that my running back touches the ball, it is Ashton Genty, I think that is a win. Versus having and Nick Singleton, Kay Allen are great running backs. They're such good running backs. The fact that like we're having this argument is like unbelievable what Ashton Genty's been able to accomplish.
It's just, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll be fun too seeing Genty on national stage because I mean we were, advocates of Genty probably should be it, the Vegas line, and the results actually came a lot closer. But the Vegas line for Genty to win the Heisman should have been much much better because that was we were really high on him, and you were high on him all year long. Well, obviously, everyone was, but like in terms of the Heisman, you were on that early. Yeah, I'll give my pick here because I don't think I've done that yet. I'll go Penn State and Penn State to cover. I just think more times than not, I just trust Penn State right in this game. I do. Boise State, like Maddox Madsen, just does a really good job taking care of the football, not taking sacks, right? So like that could be a part where it does, favor Boise State in a close one or to keep it close. I will say, like, I have more after watching SMU and Penn State, like I have more faith in Boise State to not get SMU'd, right? What SMU did that to themselves, right? You had opportunities early in that football game, even like all half. They had 28 points off of turnovers. I do not expect that to happen for Boise State. I do think their defense is probably a little bit worse than SMU's, but I also think the consistency they're going to have trying to run the football, you'll probably keep it close for a while. I think the second half you could see some stuff, some halftime adjustments. I really like the coordinators that Penn State has. Obviously, Boise State's got a solid coaching staff as well, but I just think more often than not, Penn State wins, but and covers.
Let's go to the Peach Bowl. Texas playing against Arizona State. I mean, a team. Oh, I literally said it when Arizona State was playing against. Were they playing against? Or Kansas was playing against BYU. Arizona State was playing against someone, or they're playing against Kansas State as like 8-point underdogs. And I'm like, why wouldn't we take Arizona State plus 1,700 to win the Big 12? Because I was on Kansas beating BYU, and I was also on Arizona State beating Kansas State. Now there was more stuff that needed to happen for Arizona State to win the Big 12, like aka them winning another big game against BYU the following week. But I don't know why. I don't know why I wasn't on it. Unbelievable. I literally said it on air, but here we are, and they got a chance to really prove themselves against an offense that I'll say at times is underwhelmed this year. Right, like when you get pressure on Quinn Ewers, it's a problem. And before the season, if you were to tell me that Arizona State's defense was going to be as good as it was, I would have said like, holy cow. I mean, Brian Ward, what a job, right? Because you lose your best defense, you lose your two best defensive players, right? One on the defensive line, and then you lose Jordan Clark over to Notre Dame. I know he's banged up with injuries, but when he was healthy at Arizona State, he was one of your better defenders. Like he just was. And you lose that, and you have the season that you did, right, in the Big 12, particularly in that front seven because of the level of running backs and rushing attacks that you had to play in the Big 12. That was impressive. All right. And you know that Texas is going to want to try to run the ball with Trey Wisner, who's been really solid for them once they found him and kind of rode the rock with him as the season has gone along. He's been really good. Jane Blue had the explosive touchdown, too, against Clemson. So he also is a very good running back. The staff is still high on him, too. I just think Arizona State to win this game, they got to get pressure on Quinn Ewers. They got to stop the run. And then offensively, I think just what happens, happens. I think this is going to be a Brian Ward. If Arizona State wins, it'll be a Brian Ward masterclass, and it'll be Sam Leavitt taking care of the football. I really do. So, and Arizona State can win this game. But this is the same spread, by the way, that Texas had against Clemson. Now, the difference was that game was in Austin.
Neutral site, yep.
Yep, versus a neutral site game. So Arizona State, according to Vegas odds makers, right, is a worse team than Clemson, which I probably agree with overall.
Like odds wise, yeah, for sure. But I also think you got to reward what Arizona State has done this season and the consistency they played with, and just how they've just turned it on. And they're what they've done such a good job was, and I think would be so pivotal and be so nice for Kenny Dillingham, Sam Leavitt, those guys there, is to get off to another hot start, right? Get in a positive game script, not only because you have, right, I think the best player in this football game, Scadaboo. All right, maybe you got, you could argue a couple of defensive backs for Texas, but yeah, I think Scadaboo is just so good. And if you get in a positive game script, right, not only are you running the football well and running the ball and punishing this, not that it's leaky front seven for Texas, but I do think you saw Georgia at times in the SEC championship game had some nice runs with Etienne, and I think it could be there for Scadaboo. But then also Quinn Ewers put him in a spot where he has to throw the football. And if you have some banged up offensive linemen, you saw that in the quarterfinal game, or no, in the first round game against Clemson. You had the right tackle Cameron Williams go down with the right knee sprain. You had Jake Majors, the center, go down after the big blindside hit there on the turnover. It sounds like Majors is going to play. It sounds like it's a game time decision for Connor Williams. Now, if you're Texas and you recruit the way they do and you build a program the way you do from the inside out there, you got a guy that you could just plug and play and actually be pretty damn good, right? Cole Hudson, a really nice utility man inside. You kind of slide Hudson in left guard. You move Hayden Connor over to center. And then, when Connor Williams' right tackle went down, you got a guy in Gooseby that can play for you who did pretty well.
Very well.
In pass pro. Yeah, for sure.
Like,
so
coming in big spots, Gooseby did very well.
what a luxury. What an absolute luxury. So it is nice to have for Texas. I do think though, where I just don't love Quinn Ewers having to throw the football because I think their wide receiver core, and now you'll get some reinforcements, right? With Isaiah Bond come back hopefully healthy, and we see what he's done in big games at his time in his career, especially more at Alabama. He gives you an added dimension to this offense with Matthew Golden playing better football as well. I just like Texas in this spot here. I liked Clemson last week. I wasn't surprised at the outcome, right? I thought Clemson had a chance to make it a lot closer game. I think Texas, kind of turns on. I do think, getting Isaiah Bond healthy is a huge deal. Um, I do worry about just the level of athletes on the Arizona State defense, right? You saw, and I think Clemson's got a pretty athletic defense, especially at that second level and linebackers. And there were so many times where they were just late getting over, filling. You had all those runs, the outside zones, and all that stuff that Texas was able to do and just really gash Clemson. Just a lot of that game. And I wonder if that happens again here against Arizona State.
Well, one thing I'll give Arizona State's secondary a lot of credit for, and by the way, every single starter in Arizona State's secondary has played over 700 snaps this year, right? So, like, they know what they're doing. Brian Ward is extremely confident in them. I'll say the caveat, right, with they fill the run very well, right? Like, they're in spots, okay? Like, Miles Rouser over 60 tackles. Shamari Simmons almost at 60 tackles. They're playing in the nickel.
Simmons is a big dude.
I mean, yeah, dude, they're good at being in the right spot. Problem is, like, Shamari Simmons, close to 20% missed tackle rate, right? Miles Rouser, close to 15% missed tackle rate. Like, if you miss those tackles in the secondary, like, I don't know, but like they're gone, right? Like that's a huge issue. But if they're in those right spots and they're able to make the tackles, right, in this game, 133 missed tackles, right, it's pretty significant, okay, for Arizona State. And I'll say this, like we talked about taking care of the football earlier with Boise State. Uh, Boise State and Arizona State are both tied for second in the country with only 8 turnovers on the offensive side of the football. Other teams, right, that didn't turn the ball over as much. Vanderbilt, right, was the best team in the country that they overachieved, right? Memphis won what they win 10 games, James Madison, uh, they won 9 games. Indiana made the college football playoffs. UNLV probably overachieved. Army overachieved. I mean, Clemson made the college football playoffs. Like, you're looking at teams like in the top 10, top 15 in turnovers lost. Like, it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal. And now turnovers, I know, are hard to predict, right, in a 1-game sample size, and stuff can happen, and there's a lot of volatility there. But if they take care of the football, right, and just leave it up to the players on the field, basically, I do think Texas has better players, right? But I think Arizona State is certainly going to give themselves a chance, particularly if they also don't let up explosive plays in that secondary. Again, that secondary is experienced, and they're not bad. I know they've given up some explosive plays at times, but they're good, dude. They're good, particularly in that run game. So however, with all of that being said, I think I'm going to take Texas to win. I think I'm going to take Texas to cover. Not necessarily because of my confidence in Quinn Ewers. I just think that Arizona State is going to have a really tough time scoring on Texas. I think they really are. Sam Leavitt has not experienced the kind of pressure that he's going to experience against Texas. Okay, he's a young quarterback, guys. Let's not forget that. I know he's taking care of the football really well this year, and he's done a really good job down the stretch. I mean, really nice job, getting his guys down the field. But I'm assuming Jordan Tyson, he's not healthy for this game, is he?
That's the killer right there. That is the caveat because
he's huge.
You talk about explosive plays, like those the equalizer, right? Sometimes in these games where you do have a little bit of talent edge, especially when you have a really talented defense and an offense that's maybe a little bit out physical, you scheme up explosive plays. You get guys that break a tackle or maybe make a man miss in the secondary. Like Tyson was so good at that. I mean, he had 1,100 yards, right, in 12 games, 12 and a half games, and then 12 and a half games. And then your next leading receiver was your running back, Scadaboo, at 500 yards. But after that, it was a revolving door. You saw a lot more Guillory and Stovall.
Who's there. Good. And Guillory was your leading receiver in 2023, right? Like, he's not a nobody.
Right? No. But it's obviously like Tyson was obviously the focal point. And like what he did opened up a lot of things for Scadaboo. And he's gonna have to be on his game though. Here's what I'll ask you this though. So you look at Texas's schedule, right? And I'm looking at the running backs that they played. And I know they played a lot of good ones, right? You got the kid, a couple kids at Florida, right? You got, obviously Georgia.
Texas
You played them
A&M without
twice.
Le'Veon Moss,
No Le'Veon Moss there,
Phil
and
Maffa when Clemson's offensive line fell apart at the end of the season,
well, and
particularly in
no,
the
and
run game.
Maffa got hurt too, right, in that game. So, and also that was back when Michigan you played them. They still didn't hand the ball to Cleo Mullings too, so it was more Donovan Edwards in that game. Obviously this is the best running back they've played because this is probably the second or third best running back in the country.
Yep.
Um, he could be a guy. I mean, here's what I'll ask you this: we just talked about Boise State and Penn State. There's some similarities here with maybe lesser talented team, double digit underdog, elite freaking running back, and a quarterback that is taking care of the football. Right? Who do you trust to get more work on the ground and have more success down to down? Scadaboo or Genty?
More consistency down to down. I'll probably take Genty still.
Yeah, I think
I
so
still probably
too.
take Genty.
Although I also give Kenny Dillingham 2 weeks, 4 weeks to prepare. And by the way, like, yeah, you didn't know if Texas was going to beat Clemson, but I'm pretty sure that staff was doing a lot of work on Texas, right? Even before they were going to play that football game. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Also, I mean, Texas is another one of those teams. 133 missed tackles on the season, and not a lot of that was from their safeties, who are very exceptional football players, particularly in coverage. But I don't know. They don't have great edge defenders, right? When it comes to stopping the run game, it's been a lot of Anthony Hill. Having him use that speed to get to the outside and being able to make those plays there. Like, who's their best edge defender? Against the run.
it's probably not. It's not Trey Moore. It's not the freshman either. I mean,
It's not
they've
Ethan Burke. It's not Colin Simmons. I don't know. It's probably Sorrell, right? But there's a chance that Texas could get gashed. But I don't I don't think that's going to be the case.
Well, you also like it's such a luxury having like such a good secondary because Malik Muhammad, you got the Thorpe winner, Janae Barron, Makuba's back there. Obviously, no Williams, he's been hurt, but you've kind of adjusted and not really missed a beat there. And with Noah Tyson, like you kind of feel good about being able to stack the box and focus on the Scadaboo. And if Levitt beats you, and if those receivers beat you 1-on-1, that happens, right? If you're Texas, consistently, it's going to be hard to do that. Now, here's the thing, though. Like, Scadaboo has run the ball well against stacked box before. Now, it was more Iowa State. It was different, maybe a little different caliber run defense there. But
There's a lot of linebackers, not a lot of meat, if that makes sense.
if I told you
This is more meat. A stacked box from Texas is more meat than a stacked box from Iowa State.
well, and you got Broughton and Collins in the middle. I mean, you got big dudes in the middle that can really affect like what you're doing. Like you have to run outside, and Scadaboo is really good, but I also love him running a little bit more north-south than I do east-west, especially with the speed of linebackers that Texas has. If I told you this at halftime, Scadaboo has 112 yards at halftime. Are you going to be like, whoa? I mean, obviously, that's a dumb question, but would that really surprise you?
No, not necessarily. I mean, he had.
Does he need to? Does he need to have a monster game for Arizona State to win?
I probably.
Or your defense. I think it's that, or you have turnovers and your defense just shows up like crazy,
Yeah.
and outperforms. And Brian Ward's in his bag, and you have some explosive plays in the passing game. But yeah, it's like you need Scadaboo, and he's been there all year when you've needed him. Oh, his contact balance is so freaking good. But here's the thing, though, like we talk about the SEC as like this, elite physical defenders, NFL players. We saw in Lenore Sellers, right, what he did to the SEC. And I know it's different, right? He didn't play Texas and Georgia, whatever, but like they're not perfect players, right? And you get Scatterboo in space, or you get one-on-one with a linebacker, you get him moving downhill. No one stopped him so far. But with that being said, I'm on Texas here too, and I think they're actually the reason why I'm on Texas is because I think Texas' offense is going to have work, going to put in
Okay.
work.
I mean, for Texas' sake, I would hope so. But Brian Ward is going to be pretty dialed. I mean, because I looked at this total and I was like, man, like I'm with you. Like Texas's offense could do some stuff against this defense, but I saw it at 51 and a half, and I'm like, wow, I may be kind of like the under there, but I do think that there is a potential, right, for those Texas wide receivers. It is a more talented receiver group than probably Arizona State's seen all year, right? I mean, like I can't think of a wide
Texas
receiver
Tech,
group. Oh, that's true. That's true. But Texas Tech,
they put
they
up
put up
30. They put up 30, and they
they put
won.
up numbers.
Now it was in Lubbock, right? And that's a
Texas
little
State
different.
also put up pretty good numbers, and a lot of that had to do with the passing game from Texas State. Um,
UCF, you had the different quarterback in, but obviously RJ
Jalen
Harvey
Daniels
was really
threw.
freaking good.
Jalen Daniels threw for 260 yards, 2 touchdowns.
They put up 31.
UCF, Dylan Risk threw up over 200 yards. RJ Harvey had 3 touchdowns in that game, but yeah,
That's
it's not crazy. That's not crazy. Let's go over to the Rose Bowl. Ohio State playing against Oregon in a Big Ten rematch. One that we thought we were going to get in the Big Ten championship and then maybe get again in the playoffs. First having
which
three
by the way, I'm
rematches.
I'm glad that didn't happen because right, this was the third time we're seeing this game, and Oregon won both of them. I would be extremely frustrated, right? And that's ridiculous, right? You had your chance
Yeah.
if you're Ohio State. So shout out
Yeah,
Michigan.
we're going to see that if Georgia and Texas make the national championship, right? So,
Yeah.
I, in that first game, man, Evan Stewart, dude, was the X factor in that game. Okay, Burke got absolutely torched in that game, just torched. But we've seen that from Evan Stewart at times, like going up against elite corners, like a couple years ago with Haynes King. A spot start as a backup, going into Tuscaloosa. Evan Stewart was unbelievable, right, against Terry and Arnold, who ended up being a first-round draft pick, right? Evan Stewart can sometimes do that to you. Okay, he hasn't really done that a lot consistently throughout this season. It has been mostly Tez Johnson. Jordan James has been a good running back. Whittingham has been a good running back. Dylan Gabriel, nice job managing um, games so far this season. I mean, they're undefeated for a reason, right? Where others have stumbled, Oregon has not. And I think you have to give that a lot of credit. However, if we get that Ohio State team that we saw against Tennessee, Ohio State's going to win the national championship. I'm sorry. They're probably the most talented team from top to bottom remaining in the college football playoffs from a talent perspective, right? That's not a coaching perspective. That's not, although they do have an insane coaching staff. That's not a performance, you know, assessment. This is just like they have the most talent on their team than probably anyone else in the playoffs right now. And I don't think that's crazy to say. I think you could argue Texas. I think you could argue Georgia. I think Oregon, right, if you're looking at the performance that they've had consistently throughout the season, yeah, you could put Oregon in that conversation. But from top to bottom, this Ohio State roster is nuts. And I'll be taking Ohio State minus 2.5. All right. I know that they lost early in the season. I know people like to laugh at Will Howard. People think, oh my gosh, Will Howard's not good enough quarterback to win a national championship. That is wrong. All right. That is so wrong. Will Howard is definitely good enough. He didn't have a great game against Michigan playing with what, like one leg, whatever. Who cares? Okay. You saw the Will Howard that you want to get from him against Tennessee, against a pretty good defensive team from Tennessee, by the way, I might add. I think even the receivers, we talked about the Oregon receiver room being one of the best in the country in the preseason, right? And that, they kind of have lived up to that expectation. On the Ohio State receiving room, you guys know the names, right? They're unbelievable. They put up 30 last time against Oregon. Are they going to be able to run the ball? Is the question. They did not run the ball well last time against Oregon. And Oregon ran the ball well against Ohio State in that previous matchup. Okay. I got to believe that Jim Knowles, right, is going to be dialed in for this one. I have to believe it, right? Because there's been too many times in big games where Jim Knowles has kind of let his team down a little bit, or that defense has underperformed despite all the talent on it. You're going to see the superstar talents, Jack Sawyer. You're going to see him probably make some plays, right? You're probably going to see JT Tuimoloau, come up, make some plays as well. I'm on Ohio State, man, and I do think Oregon can win this game. They literally won the last time that they played against them, right? But I do think I know Ohio State had that dud against Michigan, and I know that that's tasting pretty sour in some people's mouths, and some people are foaming at the mouth, ready to take Ohio State or Oregon plus 2.5, or maybe some people are waiting for that number to get to 3. I'm pretty confident in Ohio State in this spot, and I don't know if this is like last year when we were talking about this in the Pac-12 championship when Oregon and Washington played. We're like, this Oregon team is significantly more talented than that Washington team, right? But maybe that was foresight. And then in hindsight, we looked at that Washington team and we were like, wait a second, maybe we totally miseval the talent on the Washington team, right? Maybe this is something where we look into hindsight and we're like, okay, yeah, there was a reason that Oregon was undefeated heading into this game against Ohio State. Maybe they are as talented as they are. Maybe they do have all that first round talent. Maybe they do have top to bottom roster that is looking really good. So this could be a miseval, right, in hindsight, but I do think Ohio State has a better roster than Oregon, and I think that they'll win this game.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, right? I think I'm with you. First of all, I do want to say this is freaking awesome, right? The Rose Bowl, you got the old Pac-12 against the Big Ten. You've got maybe two of the best teams in the country. Obviously, it doesn't feel like a national championship kind of game because you still have so much to play for. Because winner's game probably gets Texas and then Georgia or Penn State or Notre Dame or whoever. So it's still a long way to go. But I think, in my opinion, you probably have the two best teams here, right, in college football. So what I'm going to be doing is, you know, instead of picking like a game here, a best bet, I'm just going to take this team, whoever I think is going to win this game to win the national title, which I know isn't a great idea because you have injuries, blah, blah, blah. But I think these teams are good enough to do that. And I went back and rewatched, their first matchup, right? October 12th, back in Eugene at Autzen Stadium, right? First of all, what an atmosphere. It was rocking. Ohio State went on the road and played actually pretty damn good and had a chance to win that football game. It was back and forth. It was incredible. I expect a similar kind of game here where you have missed opportunities on both sides, where maybe it's not the perfectly clean game that you expect to see from two elite teams. I will say for Oregon, right, you missed two field goals, or you missed a PAT and then a field goal, and then you had to go for it on one and you didn't get it. So you left like 5 points on the board. So that game that ended up as a 1-point game should have really been a 6-point game with Ohio State needing to drive, score a touchdown, and the field goal and the running the clock out with Will Howard wouldn't have even mattered. Um, and also you're missing Jordan Birch, who's really freaking good, and he's back and will be nice too against a team that struggled to run the ball against you in the first time, and now you get Jordan Birch back to help with that out as well. You mentioned the wide receivers. I'll go the tight end room here. How about the tight ends here? Been playing really good football. We saw what Sadiq did in the Penn State game. Jake Ferguson, obviously really talented himself. G. Scott has become more and more involved as the season has gone on. They've done an incredible job of leaking him out with all the attention on the running backs, on the wide receivers, and Will Howard has had a nice safety blanket over the middle of the field on crossing routes and other things that G. Scott has done a very good job of. Oh, you said it, though. Like, a couple of X factors here, and credit to me, I'm going to pat myself on the back here. In this first game, I talked about Evan Stewart being an X factor, right? And it's like, when is he going to step up? Is this the game where he shows up and shows out? And he did that a couple weeks ago, although he played 57 snaps against Penn State, 1 target, right? I don't know if that was by design, if that was just Penn State trying to phase him out and let anyone else beat you, but I don't know why you're doing that when Tez Johnson was having a big game and you've got other guys going. I don't know how I feel here. I'm probably going to lean Ohio State here, right? -2.5. Just because I think, first of all, it's very hard to beat someone twice, right? And I was so impressed with Ohio State and what they did last week. I mean, how could you not be? This team is obviously geared up and ready to go. It's going to be a hell of a scene. Obviously, Oregon has been there and done that, right? I'm not worried just because they haven't won a national title. They haven't been in a playoff, really, this coaching staff, that they aren't going to be ready for it. I mean, they played in big-time games, plenty of them, and they won one against Ohio State this year. Ohio State's the same thing. They've been there and done that as well. But I don't know. I just think it's gonna be so good. Who do you think runs the ball better right in this game? Does that matter? Like, to me, I think like if you
Yeah,
can
it
run the ball
matters.
consistently, either side, like I think you're gonna win the game.
Yeah, I think it matters a lot. I don't know. I mean, Oregon ran the ball better last time. I would say it's kind of based on game script, probably a lot. But like, I guess from a down to down perspective, I would expect Oregon to run the football a little bit better than Ohio State, just because of what we've seen all season.
What and well, I will. Okay, you go. You go. You go.
Well, let me add, like, I know people want to point at that Wisconsin game and be like, "Oh my gosh, look what that defense did to Wisconsin," right? But Tez Johnson didn't play in that game, right? That he's such a huge deal, like in terms of like spreading out your field, like in forcing a defense to think about him all the time, right? And that's what you were missing when you lost him in the Wisconsin game. Obviously, he's back, right? So now you have like you just have multiple options, right? Like you just you have to account for everything, and I think Ohio State has the talent to cover that. They just didn't show it right in the first time they played against Oregon, right? So we're yeah, I'm gonna need to see Ohio State's defense and Jim Knowles really lock in if you're going to see Ohio State win this game. I don't think it's going to come down. If the exact same thing came down to it, right? Like in the first game, that first game's not on Will Howard, despite what Ohio State fans want you to believe, right? The Michigan game was not.
Some Ohio State fans.
Yeah, the Michigan game was not entirely on Will Howard, right? Like some Ohio State fans would have you believe. I think Will Howard, like if you were to give me both of these quarterbacks, right, and be like, hey, I need you to have a quarterback, right? Pick between these two quarterbacks to win you a national championship, right? We're talking about like, what are you getting at their best? Okay. I would take Will Howard over Dylan Gabriel, and I'm probably going to get crucified for that. And sure, we're going to come back, and Dylan Gabriel's probably going to throw for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the comment section's going to love that, right? But I genuinely would take Will Howard over Dylan Gabriel. If you're asking me when you're getting these two players at their best, who are you taking? Yeah, I'm taking Will Howard. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll say that both these quarterbacks. Not that you
Also,
can't.
Dylan Gabriel, by the way, is very close to becoming the all-time leading passer in college football history. He's like 300 some yards away. So something to monitor.
Or no, it's 800, right?
Is it 800?
I think it's 200 something a game. I think in the next 3 games. I don't know. While you're checking on that, to kind of piggyback off that point, I will say that these two quarterbacks are like uniquely suited for the offenses that they are in. So
You're right.
like
It's 800 yards.
So I think you're gonna switch. Like I think if you switch Will Howard and Dylan Gabriel, I think both teams probably get worse. But in your point, yeah, I kind of trust Will Howard in this spot here. And also, by the way, is Jeremiah?
Say it.
Is he the best wide receiver in this game?
I mean, from a toolsy standpoint and like everything that he does, yeah. But like Tez Johnson in terms of productivity,
He'll have more yards probably.
Tez Johnson has been a more productive receiver. That doesn't mean that Jeremiah Smith isn't more talented or better, right?
Yeah. When I was kind of going down this game here, I was thinking about like who are the best players going to be on the field, because sometimes like that's what you need in these big time games is like star players. Like just you can't scheme for it, right? It's just going to be you got to go make a play, right? It's going to be 3rd and long, whatever it may be. And I'm thinking about when Oregon has the ball, like who are the best players on the field? And I think my first two I went to, and I might be wrong here, is Caleb Downs and Jack Sawyer, right? And when you go on the other side of the ball, the best players on the field, it's probably not Jeremiah Smith. But damn it, man, I feel really good about what he's going to be able to do in this game. I know you got some really talented players in that secondary for Oregon. You've got, Uiagalelei is probably the best player on the field when Oregon has on defense. But I don't know. I just think sometimes like in this game where you have, I think, pretty equal coaching staffs, I think equal talent, like the general 22 of talent. I just think like the upper tier, the upper echelon players, right? Like you said, when these guys are playing at their best, I think Ohio State has that advantage there. And so neutral site, big game. I think they'll show up and they'll get a win here. It would surprise me if this game is more than 10 points in either direction. Yeah, because these teams are they're just so good. They're just really good.
But I'll take Ohio State.
I will too.
Lit. Let's go to the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame and Georgia. Two teams with very good defenses. Okay, two teams that have won the games that they've needed to win to get here. Right, Georgia, a stinker against Ole Miss, sure. A stinker against Alabama. That was the Jalen Milroe, Brian Williams game, which, by the way, he came back in. Georgia's going to be without Carson Beck. Notre Dame's going to be without Riley Mills, their captain, as well. I think this is really interesting. The spread is 1.5 in favor of Georgia, right? And this game is it not in Atlanta?
It's in the Sugar Bowl. It's in
New Orleans.
yeah.
So I'm when I'm looking at these two teams, okay, I it is hard to evaluate Georgia's offense, right? Because at Carson Beck, we've seen him at his worst, we've seen him at his best. It's hard to tell what you're going to get. Gunnar Stockton, I think people are going to assume, and maybe rightfully so, that Gunnar Stockton gives you a higher floor than Carson Beck does.
I think with the style of play that you're going to see Georgia run with, because he is a little bit more of, a scrambler type quarterback, got that dual threat to him. So while Carson Beck, you have the ceiling. I think honestly for this offense here, and we'll see what happens in this game here because, one half of football is not enough to really tell you, if a player can win a championship for you. But I think with this team right now, and we've talked about it since the summer, right? The one concern we had with Georgia was this wide receiver room is not elite at all. And you've had inconsistencies, you've had drop issues, you've had injuries. Obviously, the tight end room is pretty damn good, but it's a significant drop down than what Brock Bowers gave you. I mean, look at what McConkey and Bowers are doing in the NFL as rookies right now. They are giving everyone hell, right? So, excuse my language there, but it's a problem. But with Stockton, right, you have that added running element too, and you're kind of not being as risky down the field with the football. And obviously, his decision making isn't perfect, right? But newsflash, like was Carson Beck's? Not at all. You saw him put the ball in harm's way a lot. And so you mentioned floor. I think I look at turnovers and running game, and that's kind of the floor of teams, right? It's like if you can run the ball, okay, and you don't turn the football over, you're probably going to meet your floor in most games. Yeah, I don't think that's crazy at all. And Georgia has about as high a floor as anybody in the country. And so you ask me, okay, Carson Beck's out for the year. You've got Gunnar Stockton there, former high recruit, been in the program for a while. You have a couple weeks to prepare. It doesn't really change my opinion too much. It's more going to be like, well, let's wait and see, right? If he really struggles, I think, yeah, Carson Beck could have given you some help, especially if you've got some injuries to some pass rushers for Notre Dame. But the reality is I don't know how big of a severe drop off it's going to be in terms of actual production on the field for your offense.
Yeah. Notre Dame secondary, they've played phenomenal, right, all year, even with battling with some injuries and transfer portal guys. When I'm looking at this, I try to look at how is Notre Dame going to run the ball against this Georgia front seven, and I quite frankly don't know. Taking this game, I'll take Notre Dame plus 1.5. I'll take them to win as well, but I don't have a great reason to pick either team, if that makes sense. But I do think Riley Leonard is a gamer, dude. That dude just wins football games, man. I don't know what to say. I mean, he lost. Yeah, sure, he lost the NIU game, but that was really bad, and that was largely on Riley Leonard for sure. But the way they've been able to run the ball down the stretch, wasn't overly impressed with their offensive performance against Indiana, but Indiana's also good defense. All right, let's give them a little bit of credit here. Not the level of talent that Georgia's defense is right. This is the best defense that they played against all year, but that's what happens when you play in the playoffs, right? You're going to be playing the best, whatever it is, right, that you've played against all year, right, because you're playing in the playoffs. So I don't know. Are you on Georgia in this one? I have a feeling you're probably on Georgia.
Yeah, a little bit. I just think their overall talent, 1-22, is a little bit better. I do think some of the injuries that Notre Dame has sustained are kind of brutal. Riley Mills is a good player for him, and he could be a guy where you really get affecting Gunnar Stockton, especially interior pressure. You want to talk about getting an inexperienced quarterback, or maybe you're not totally proven quarterback, and getting them frustrated. His interior pressure could be serious. And you also saw how many batted balls that Notre Dame had. They put in work with that, right? And Obviously not one guy who knows the impact of what it could be. I know they got some talent there behind them, but I think it's something to think about for sure. I worry. So I'm going to take Georgia here, right? And 1.5 is what we're picking it at, I assume. And that line has moved across 0 pretty quickly. But it's a pick 'em, right? And basically a pick 'em here. So obviously I'll take Georgia to win as well. Um, I I do think like Riley Leonard is going to have to outplay Gunnar Stockton for Notre Dame to win. But like, how much more does he have to outplay him? Like obviously you take care of the football. What he does so well is avoiding sacks and extending plays and converting on third downs. Right, don't miss downfield shots when they're there. And you saw Georgia at times. Like when have they struggled, or when have they excelled, and when have they struggled? Right. You look at that Ole Miss game. You look at the Alabama game. And it was that Ole Miss front that gave Georgia like absolute problems, right? Turnovers, inefficiency running the ball, third down, just absolute ineptitude. And then Alabama, it was turnovers and explosive plays for Alabama. And so can Notre Dame replicate that in some sort of way? That's why the Riley Mills thing does worry me, because he could be a guy that you look at that front that Ole Miss did, and you could give Georgia some problems, especially with, I think, a mismatch. Now, obviously, no Benjamin Morrison, but they've played well without him most of the year. Like, this is a wide receiver room that Georgia, like, and Notre Dame has played wide receiver rooms that are better than this, for sure. Like, a good amount of them. Louisville, USC, Indiana, dare I say, potentially. I don't know. But I think Georgia does enough. I think Georgia gets enough.
To play into your argument too, like Riley Leonard, as good as he is getting out of sacks, right? He still isn't a good passer when he's under pressure.
Which no one is. Like, other than Jackson. Like, Jackson Dart's freaking crazy with that. But, like, who else is good? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that, but it is a significant drop. Like Riley Leonard, when he is kept clean, like he is unbelievable. If you look at the metrics there, he is absolutely unbelievable. However, it is a bigger drop off than I think most, you know? Um, he's taken 15 sacks, or sorry, his pressure to sack ratio when he's blitzed is about 16%. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I like Riley Leonard better than Gunnar Stockton, quite frankly. I don't love either of them as a passer. Uh, we'll see. Jury's still out on Gunnar Stockton, whether or not he's a really good passer or not, I think. But yeah, sorry. And also, by the way, I think Georgia's receivers are better than what Notre Dame has. But is it by that much? Right?
I think the ceiling of Georgia's receivers is a lot better, right? London
Sure.
Humphreys,
Absolutely.
when he's making plays, Arian Smith down the football field, right? If
The tight
Lovett on
ends.
third down, like doing his thing, the tight ends for sure. But like, have we seen consistency in any game this
No.
year from Georgia? Maybe against Tennessee, maybe. But I also think Tennessee's secondary is a significant drop off as to where Notre Dame's going to be, right? It's a great point you
Even
brought
with
up.
injuries.
Yeah, even with injuries. And I kind of wrote this down here in my notes and prepping this. These teams like feel really similar to me, right? You've got a mobile quarterback, you've got pretty damn good running backs, your wide receivers, nothing to write home about, good tight end. Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. That came up on me fast. Pause. You got a pretty good offensive line room, as well as some solid defender, like a really good defense. Um, So it's like, if Notre Dame is going to win this football game, like they're going to have to out Georgia, and we have not seen many teams do that. And honestly, like the only team I can remember doing that in the last 4 years, it's probably Ole Miss this year, right? In terms of just physically overwhelming you, and it was on the road at Ole Miss. It was yucky weather. You had some turnovers, and your offensive line was kind of getting destroyed. That's what worries me. I I tend to lean on the fact that this game is going to be lower scoring, and I think both teams can absolutely win in that kind of game. Um, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I also think the coaching advantage probably goes to Georgia as well. I say probably. The coaching advantage definitely goes to Georgia on that sideline. So I get it. I get why
Yeah.
you pick Georgia. We'll fade each other. Definitely not a best bet. The spread isn't the best bet, but we'll talk. We'll maybe talk about in a minute here. What else we like in this game, but yeah, I guess like the last point that I guess I want to make, right? Georgia and Texas, like when they played against each other, like turnovers were a big deal for Georgia, particularly in that first win, right? Like when they only had one scoring drive where they started outside of their own 50. Riley Leonard's done a good job taking care of the football this year, guys. And if Notre Dame's going to be keeping the ball on the ground a lot, I don't know that Georgia's going to have great field position all the time. So that's kind of where I'm at. Georgia been prone to turn the ball over on offense, but that's kind of a Carson Beck stat. It's not really a Gunnar Stockton stat. So I don't know. I think I just kind of like Notre Dame in the spot. I really do. I think that they run the ball definitely a lot better, and I think that's kind of the deal breaker for me. That's what kind of put me over the edge with Notre Dame there. When two teams that are going to be trying to control the football and trying to be playing their best defensively and limit explosive plays, I think the team that runs the football better will ultimately win this game. So for that reason I'm on Notre Dame. So sorry about it.
No, you're good. That's a great point there. Notre Dame is second in the country in turnover margin at plus 16, right? So not only are they turning the ball over, but they're also taking care of the football, like you said, with Riley Leonard. It'd be interesting. Either way wouldn't surprise me. What would surprise me would be a high scoring game here. That one, like you get in the high 20s, low 30s, that would surprise me, even with all the athletes on the field. I just think like it's going to be tough unless there's some turnover fest. But like we said, like without Carson Beck, I think Georgia's going to play conservative football. Notre Dame has done that all year and taken care of the football. You think Notre Dame running game, like their O line plus Riley Leonard plus scheme plus their two running backs, is better than Georgia offers?
On the defensive side of the football, or what they
Well,
Georgia offers on offense?
I guess we'll say both, right? So like, in a vacuum, right? Whose offense is better at running the football, and then who's got a better matchup? Like, because yeah,
Well, it's been Notre Dame all year has proven to us that they could run the football a lot better. Even if you think the talent on Georgia is better on that offensive line, if you think the talent on Georgia is better at the running back room for some reason, which I don't think you would say that, I, Notre Dame has been way more effective at running the football this year. Period. Right. So I'll take Notre Dame. That's it for our previews for those games. Let's get into the counter. Let's talk about our best bets. What are we walking up here to the counter, banging our debit cards on the table, saying, "Hey, what are we taking this week?" Uh, I've only got two bets for this week, right? Because, well, if you want to check out our best bets for the bowl games, we have a lot more to offer there, right? Because there's a lot more games. But for this, I only got two bets, right? Only in four games, which I think is pretty good, right? You don't always scrape up two bets. I believe you also got two bets as well. So four games, four bets from each of us. That's fine. Or four bets combined, I guess. I'll start, I guess. I'll take Ohio State minus 2.5 against Oregon. I talked about it. I think Ohio State's a more talented team. If we get that Tennessee game, right, that Tennessee team that we saw Ohio State play against, we get high level Will Howard, we get a high level secondary playing well for Ohio State. I think they win this football game, and I think it's more than a field goal.
yeah, it's not crazy at all. I mean, I thought about it. I really did think about it, but I think Oregon. I just gave them a lot of credit, and what they've done and responded in big spots here. That coaching staff is damn good. There's a lot of talent there. Um, I leaned your way for sure, and if I had to pick one, it would have been that one, in that game. But yeah, I might stay away from that one just because I think those are the two best teams in the country, and like I could see a lot of things happening in that game to where my conviction isn't quite there enough to put my money behind my mouth. I will go over to the Peach Bowl though. Give me Texas team total over 31.5. And this could be a spot here where um, I kind of buy a point, maybe a half a point here, because I think 31, obviously a key number in football for scoring. But we've seen Arizona State give up 30 plus points to inferior offenses. right, than this Texas team. I know that Quinn Ewers is hard to be trusted at times, but we've also seen him play really good football in big time games before in his career. But the reason why I'm taking this is I think you get Isaiah Bond healthy, right? You get some offensive linemen back, and even if they aren't healthy, you have very good quality backups in there, and I think they'll be able to run the football and run the ball well. And obviously, you get to a second half where this is a 12-point spread. So you could see a spot where you have some negative game script in terms of Texas not trying to score the football at will. But I think they do enough to get over 31 and a half. And also, I wouldn't surprise me if Arizona State's scheming up some things and some long, quick touchdowns where Texas time of possession and their actual number of possessions will be favor of me, right? Getting that team total over 31 and a half.
Yeah, I don't think you're crazy at all. Not something I'll have it on, but I like the thought process there. I'm going to go to the Notre Dame Georgia game, like we just talked about. I'm going to take under 45 and a half. Keep it simple, stupid. And that'll be my last bet. I don't think either of these teams are going to be reaching 24, 28 points. I think this is a closer 20 to 17 game, 17-13, 17-14, 13-10, right? I see these defenses matching up very well with each other. You got a young quarterback, Gunnar Stockton. We'll see what he's able to do. Riley Leonard taking care of the football. I don't anticipate a ton of turnovers happening in this game, giving teams short fields. I think we see the punters put in a lot of work this game.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar spot with you. I'm just going to stick on one side here, sticking with the team total idea. Notre Dame under 22 and a half. And I kind of like that line. I know 23 is a spot that I could realistically get to, but I think 20, 21 is right going to be where Notre Dame's going to be and maybe lower. This game feels like a first to 21, first to 20 wins. You know what I mean? Where you've got a spot where there's going to be, I think, a game script and a flow and the momentum of the game that, like you said, kind of leans toward the under, especially if some defensive lines and the fronts are having their way. And even if they aren't, right, I think running the football, you're going to see both these teams try to do and churn some clock. It's going to be about maybe getting red zone stops here for either of these teams, but I also don't trust either of these teams like too much in the red zone. I know they're like Notre Dame specifically is very good in the red zone in terms of scoring touchdowns. They're 10th in the country at 75+%. But I also think like with these defenses, with some injuries, blah, 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 like other things, I see a spot where I just have a hard time seeing Notre Dame putting up over 23 points. And I think, yeah. Also, by the way, I think Notre Dame can win and get under 21 points too, under 22 and a half points. Right. Last thing I'll say
Absolutely.
about that. This could be a spot where it's 17, 13, 19
Yeah, I'm
to
with you.
16. Like it's going to be a really muddied up game. I wouldn't be surprised at that at all.
That's going to do it for our preview. Best bets, previews of our games in the college football playoffs. I'm excited. Can't wait for these games, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Make sure you guys are locked in. Make sure if you like the content, like the video. It's that simple. Make sure you guys are also subscribed as well so you can be tuned in for the rest of the college football playoffs, but also Coaching Carousel, where I think we do a particularly good job on this show previewing those coaches heading into their new jobs. We're kind of waiting on some of these coaches to put together some staffs, maybe some of this transfer portal stuff to die down a little bit, and we'll have a better look right at where we'll see these coaches in the future stacked up, relative to their conference and the rest of college football, and then also the transfer portal. We'll be talking about players as well. This is the Redshirt Sophomore, right? We don't sit out, so make sure you guys are strapped up. CD, anything for you on the way out?
No, listen to everything he just said. Obviously, thank you guys for watching. Hope you're enjoying the football games as much as we are, and now also being able to cover it as well. Thanks for all your support. And if you're still listening right now, you guys are awesome. And thank you so much.
And we'll see y'all in the next one.